It began with a quiet summons few people even knew had taken place. Behind closed doors, senior estate trustees and royal advisors gathered to review a collection of papers long believed to have been fully settled. But the expressions on their faces suggested otherwise. What they uncovered would soon leave Queen Camilla stunned and reopen questions no one expected to face again. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For years, many within royal circles had quietly assumed that Prince Philip's personal affairs had been thoroughly examined and that every promise, every instruction, and every private arrangement had already been accounted for. His passing had brought with it months of legal reviews and careful administration, and most believed the chapter had finally been closed. That was precisely why the routine meeting taking place behind palace walls attracted so little attention at first. Estate trustees were simply carrying out another standard review, something that had been done countless times before. Nobody expected anything unusual. Nobody anticipated that old files, sealed correspondence, and archived records would suddenly become the center of a mystery capable of sending shockwaves through the royal family. Yet, as administrative documents were reopened and cross-referenced against previous summaries, something immediately caught the attention of several senior aides. Certain references did not seem to align with earlier records. Names, annotations, and notations that had once appeared insignificant now seemed strangely inconsistent with the inheritance arrangements everyone thought had already been finalized. At first, there were whispers that perhaps it was nothing more than a clerical oversight, but the deeper officials looked, the more uneasy they became. Quiet conversations began spreading through private offices. Those familiar with the review reportedly sensed that something was different this time. Something hidden in plain sight had suddenly returned. King Charles was privately informed before news could travel beyond the most trusted circles. Sources close to the situation suggest that the monarch initially believed the matter to be routine, assuming that trustees were merely completing the final stages of paperwork connected to his late father's estate. Queen Camilla, according to various reports, shared the same assumption. There appeared to be no reason for concern. After all, years had passed, and the understanding within royal circles was that every important matter had already been resolved. But palace insiders soon noticed an unusual level of discretion surrounding the discussions. Certain aides were instructed to maintain silence. Meetings became increasingly private. Questions that would normally receive immediate answers were met with unusual caution. Before long, whispers began spreading among those who had spent decades around the institution. Some wondered whether a forgotten instruction had somehow escaped notice. Others questioned whether an overlooked name had remained buried inside Prince Philip's papers all these years, without anyone realizing its significance. The possibility seemed almost impossible to believe. Yet with every document reviewed, the sense of mystery only grew stronger. And what had begun as an ordinary administrative exercise was quickly transforming into something much larger. Something capable of challenging assumptions that many believed had long been settled. Even among seasoned courtiers, there was a growing realization that Prince Philip's remarkable attention to detail may have left behind one final surprise. And as the trustees continued their painstaking examination, few could have imagined just how extraordinary that surprise would prove to be. But the forgotten paperwork was only the beginning, and what lay inside would shake assumptions many believed had already been settled. For decades, Prince Philip was known for keeping meticulous records and valuing loyalty above recognition. Those closest to him often described a man who planned carefully and left little to chance. Yet among thousands of pages and personal notes, one detail had somehow escaped attention until now. The growing mysteries surrounding the review of Prince Philip's papers only deepened as trustees continued examining materials that many had believed held no further surprises in life. The late Duke of Edinburgh had earned a reputation for remarkable discipline and extraordinary attention to detail. Those who worked alongside him frequently spoke about his methodical approach to everything under his care. Whether it involved royal engagements, charitable organizations, or deeply personal matters, Prince Philip rarely left anything unfinished. He believed that commitments mattered, traditions deserved protection, and promises once made should never be casually forgotten. It was a philosophy that shaped his entire life, and according to those who knew him best, it remained central to his thinking until the very end. That reputation was precisely why the unexpected inconsistencies discovered by trustees had begun causing such unease. Prince Philip was not a man associated with oversights. He was known for carefully preserving records and maintaining extensive files covering decades of royal life. Every note, every letter, and every piece of correspondence carried meaning. Some of those documents stretch back years, reflecting relationships and understandings that had long faded from public attention. Others contained reminders of private commitments that only a select few had ever known existed. And now, with renewed scrutiny being applied to those archives, questions that had once seemed impossible were beginning to emerge. Reports suggest that several references uncovered during the review pointed towards a correspondence that had been largely overlooked during earlier settlements. At first glance, they appeared insignificant, little more than ordinary administrative matters buried beneath mountains of paperwork. But the more experts studied them, the more difficult it became to dismiss them as simple irrelevancies. Dates aligned. Notes corresponded with earlier records. Certain references appeared repeatedly. What had once seemed disconnected now formed a pattern that demanded answers. Meanwhile, within royal circles, memories that had long been forgotten began resurfacing. Family members reportedly found themselves recalling conversations from years earlier, remarks that had seemed harmless at the time, but now carried entirely different meanings. Small details previously dismissed as insignificant suddenly appeared far more important. There were whispers about promises made quietly and loyalties remembered privately. Some wondered whether Prince Philip had intentionally ensured that certain commitments would survive long after his passing. Others questioned whether those commitments had simply been overlooked during earlier reviews and had remained hidden until chance finally brought them back into the light. What made the situation even more extraordinary was the growing realization that this was becoming about far more than inheritance. It was about Prince Philip himself, about the values he defended, about the traditions he protected, and perhaps most importantly, about the people he never forgot. Because throughout his life, loyalty had meant everything to him. He was known for standing by individuals others had overlooked. He respected quiet service and remembered acts of devotion that many might have ignored. Those qualities had defined his character, and now, years after his passing, they appeared to be speaking once again through the pages he had left behind. As speculation intensified, one possibility began troubling even seasoned advisors. What if an old promise had never truly disappeared? What if a commitment that everyone believed had been resolved had simply been waiting to be rediscovered? That question alone was enough to transform quiet concern into genuine suspense. And as trustees carefully compared records, reviewed correspondence, and revisited documents once considered insignificant, they slowly began to notice something impossible to ignore. But as trustees compared records, they discovered that one name appeared again and again, and nobody expected it. What initially appeared to be a clerical detail soon transformed into the center of a royal mystery. Hidden among pages thought to have no further significance was the identity of someone many believed had never been part of Prince Philip's final arrangements at all. The longer the trustees studied the records before them, the more difficult it became to explain away what they were seeing. At first, the repeated references had seemed too unusual to carry any genuine significance. Yet page after page, note after note, and annotation after annotation pointed toward the same conclusion. There was a name that had somehow survived years of reviews and settlements, a name that many believed had never been included in Prince Philip's final considerations. And yet, according to the documents now being re-examined, that assumption appeared to be far from the truth. Reports suggest that the discovery immediately raised concerns among those responsible for administering the late Duke of Edinburgh's affairs. Questions began surfacing with increasing urgency. How had these references escaped earlier scrutiny? Why had the individuals seemingly vanished from previous summaries? More importantly, had something important been overlooked? Or had certain details simply been regarded as insignificant until now? Nobody had immediate answers, but one thing was becoming impossible to ignore. The pattern was too consistent to dismiss. Legal experts were quietly brought in discussions as trustees sought clarification. Supporting notes attached to various records appeared to strengthen the mystery rather than resolve it. Different pieces of correspondence seemed to support one another in ways that no one had anticipated. The consistency itself became perhaps the most startling aspect of the entire situation. Had there been only one isolated mention It might have been easy to classify the matter as an error, but according to those familiar with the review, this same individual appeared repeatedly across documents spanning different periods. Such repetition left senior advisors increasingly unsettled. Within palace circles, speculation spread quickly, though always behind closed doors. Senior figures who had spent decades around the institution reportedly struggled to understand how such a development could emerge so unexpectedly. Several family members, according to various reports, were left genuinely surprised. Memories were revisited. Old conversations were reconsidered. Remarks that once seemed insignificant now carried entirely different meanings. Suddenly, forgotten moments from years earlier appeared far more important than anyone had realized at the time. What made the situation even more extraordinary was the uncertainty surrounding the omission itself. Some quietly wondered whether the overlooked beneficiary had simply been lost amid the complexity of earlier settlements. Others believed the answer might be more complicated. Was it an administrative oversight? A misunderstanding? Or had Prince Philip intentionally left clues behind, trusting that eventually the truth would reveal itself? Those questions fueled endless discussions among advisors and legal experts alike. Yet despite the growing speculation, no definitive explanation emerged. Meanwhile, the atmosphere surrounding the review became increasingly tense. Trustees who had expected to conclude routine matters now found themselves navigating one of the most unexpected developments connected to Prince Philip's legacy. Every new document seemed to deepen the mystery rather than resolve it. Every answer appeared to generate even more questions. And as whispers spread through royal circles, there was a growing awareness that the implications extended far beyond legal technicalities. Expectations that had remained unquestioned for years suddenly appeared vulnerable. Assumptions that many considered permanent no longer seemed secure. Because the deeper the investigation went, the more extraordinary the forgotten name appeared to become. And while the wider family had yet to fully grasp the significance of the discovery, there was one person whose understanding of the situation would soon change dramatically. But the revelation would prove especially shocking for Queen Camilla, whose expectations suddenly faced unexpected complications. Those present during the private briefings reportedly noticed a dramatic shift in mood as the significance of the forgotten beneficiary became impossible to ignore. What had begun as a routine examination had transformed into a development capable of altering long-held assumptions. By this stage, the atmosphere surrounding the review had changed completely. What had initially been approached as a straightforward administrative matter was now being treated with extraordinary caution. According to various reports, advisors responsible for overseeing the discussions understood that the implications extended far beyond paperwork. There was a growing awareness that Prince Philip's legacy might contain a chapter no one had anticipated reopening. And at the center of that growing uncertainty stood Queen Camilla, who was finally being informed of details that had remained confined to only a handful of trusted officials. Sources familiar with the matter suggest that the information presented by advisors immediately changed the tone of private conversations. For years, assumptions regarding the late Duke of Edinburgh's estate had been accepted as settled. There had been little reason to revisit old expectations or question understandings that had endured since his passing. Yet the repeated references discovered by trustees had now made that impossible. Questions once considered unnecessary suddenly demanded answers. And with every new explanation offered, the mystery surrounding the forgotten beneficiary appeared to deepen rather than disappear. Palace insiders reportedly described an unmistakable sense of surprise among several senior figures. Even individuals who had spent decades navigating royal affairs found themselves confronted by a development that few had imagined possible. There were whispers of disbelief. Quiet discussions became increasingly sensitive. Long-standing interpretations regarding Prince Philip's intentions were suddenly being reconsidered. The certainty that had existed only days earlier was rapidly being replaced by caution and uncertainty. Throughout these delicate conversations, King Charles was said to have focused on maintaining stability. Those close to the monarch suggest that his primary concern centered on preventing speculation from overwhelming reason. The situation demanded patience. It demanded discretion. Most importantly, it required careful judgment. While emotions naturally accompanied a discovery of such significance, Charles reportedly understood that premature conclusions could create unnecessary tensions within an already complex family environment. Meanwhile, Courtiers and senior aides quietly began preparing for the possibility that the matter might eventually attract wider attention. Although discussions remained private, there was a clear recognition that interests surrounding Prince Philip's papers would be impossible to ignore. If details ever emerged beyond palace walls, every word spoken carried weight, every interpretation required scrutiny. The stakes had become increasingly serious. Legal advisors, aware of the growing emotions involved, repeatedly emphasized the need for restraint. According to reports, they warned against assigning meanings too quickly or assuming intentions without examining every available piece of evidence. Supporting records needed to be reviewed. Correspondence had to be understood within its proper context. Prince Philip's own values and habits required consideration. Nothing, they argued, should be viewed in isolation, because what seemed obvious at first glance could prove far more complicated beneath the surface. Yet despite these efforts to preserve calm, there was no escaping the reality that family dynamics had entered sensitive territory. Old assumptions had been disturbed. Expectations that once appeared secure were now shadowed by uncertainty. And with every passing day, the central question became more pressing. Everyone seemed to have theories. Everyone had opinions. But opinions alone could not explain why the forgotten beneficiary had remained hidden for so long. Because beyond the emotions, beyond the whispers, and beyond the growing speculation, one truth remained. The documents themselves held the answers, and the greatest mysteries of all still remained unsolved. But while emotions ran high, the trustees still faced a much bigger challenge, determining what Prince Philip truly intended. The discovery forced estate officials into unfamiliar territory. Every page, annotation, and handwritten instruction suddenly carried enormous weight. What had once seemed insignificant now held the potential to reshape a story many thought had reached its conclusion years earlier. With uncertainty growing and speculation spreading throughout royal circles, the trustees understood that assumptions alone could no longer guide them. If Prince Philip had left behind something of genuine significance, then every answer would have to come from the records themselves. What followed was no longer a routine administrative process. It became an exhaustive search for meaning. Files that had once been neatly stored away were reopened. Supporting documents were carefully compared. Correspondence dating back years was revisited with fresh eyes. Nothing, no matter how small or seemingly irrelevant, could be dismissed. Reports suggest that estate officials launched one of the most detailed reviews connected to Prince Philip's papers since the period immediately following his passing. Legal specialists worked alongside senior royal advisors, determined to understand not only the language contained within the documents, but the intentions that may have existed behind them. Notes scribbled in margins, personal references, and attached correspondence suddenly carried extraordinary importance. What had once appeared to be ordinary administrative details now seemed capable of revealing something much deeper. As experts examined annotations left beside official papers, new questions emerged. Certain comments appeared unusually personal. Others hinted at understandings that extended beyond formal arrangements. According to those familiar with the discussions, some pieces of correspondence seemed to contain layers of meaning that had previously gone unnoticed. Words once viewed as routine were now being reconsidered in an entirely different light. Every sentence became part of a larger puzzle, and with each discovery, the mystery surrounding the forgotten beneficiary only intensified. Old letters also began attracting renewed attention. Family references, expressions of gratitude, and memories tied to decades past suddenly became relevant once again. What made the process so difficult was that Prince Philip had never been a man to speak carelessly. Those who knew him best often described someone who valued loyalty, remembered acts of devotion, and rarely forgot commitments once they had been made. That reputation itself became an important factor in the investigation, because if the repeated references had been intentional, then understanding his character was just as important as understanding the paperwork. Meanwhile, discussions among advisors became increasingly complex. Historical promises connected to Prince Philip were quietly revisited. Former conversations once considered insignificant were now viewed through a different lens. Some reports suggested that old understandings may have survived far longer than anyone realized. Others argued that the references could carry meanings that had simply been misunderstood over time. There were no easy conclusions. In fact, the deeper the review progressed, the more interpretations seemed to emerge. That uncertainty only heightened the tension within palace circles. senior figures reportedly found themselves navigating a growing divide between emotion and evidence. Some believed the answer was becoming clearer with every document uncovered. Others insisted that caution remained essential. Nobody wanted to misinterpret the wishes of a man whose legacy had been defined by duty and careful planning. Yet despite the disagreements, one truth became impossible to ignore. Whatever explanation eventually emerged, it would not be simple, because the documents were beginning to reveal something unexpected. Something that reached far beyond questions of inheritance or financial arrangements. Something rooted in memory, loyalty, and principles that had shaped Prince Philip throughout his life. And as trustees moved closer to understanding the man behind the paperwork, they slowly realized that the answer they were searching for had never been measured in wealth alone. But the answers uncovered would reveal that Prince Philip's thinking had always been guided by something deeper than money. Long before the present controversy, Prince Philip had developed a reputation for honoring commitments others sometimes overlooked. According to those familiar with his character, loyalty mattered more than convenience, and forgotten promises were never truly forgotten in his eyes. As trustees continued piecing together the mystery surrounding the overlooked beneficiary, the focus gradually shifted away from legal complexities and towards something far more personal. The deeper they ventured into Prince Philip's records, the clearer it became that understanding the man himself was essential to understanding the choices he had made. For decades, the Duke of Edinburgh had been known for many things. His sharp wit, his unwavering support for Queen Elizabeth II, and his relentless dedication to duty had become defining features of his public image. Yet those who knew him privately often spoke about another quality that mattered just as much. Prince Philip never forgot loyalty. Former aides and longtime associates had frequently described a man who placed enormous importance on keeping his word. According to those who worked alongside him over the years, he remembered acts of kindness, respected quiet service, and valued personal devotion in ways that rarely attracted public attention. Promises made in confidence were treated with seriousness. Commitments were not viewed as temporary conveniences, but as responsibilities to be honored. And that philosophy, many now believed, may have left its mark upon the very documents trustees were examining. Reports suggest that fresh evidence uncovered during the review began reinforcing that belief. Notes that once seemed ordinary suddenly appeared to support earlier understandings. Correspondence that had puzzled advisors now made greater sense when viewed through the lens of Prince Philip's character. The repeated references to the forgotten beneficiary no longer appeared random. Instead, they seemed connected to something rooted in memory and principle, something much older, something far more meaningful than anyone had initially assumed. As this realization spread among those involved in the review, memories began resurfacing within the wider family. Conversations that had been dismissed years earlier suddenly took on new significance. Remarks once considered insignificant were revisited with renewed attention. Certain moments overlooked at the time now appeared strangely important. Family members reportedly found themselves re-examining the past, wondering whether clues had existed all along without anyone recognizing their importance. Meanwhile, palace insiders quietly acknowledged that the entire matter carried a powerful emotional dimension. This was no longer simply about paperwork or inheritance. It was about relationships. It was about trust. And above all, it was about the values that had guided Prince Philip throughout his remarkable life. Even those attempting to maintain strict objectivity reportedly recognized that emotions could not be separated from the story unfolding before them. Because the more they learned, the more they understood that wealth had never been the driving force behind the late Duke's decisions. Instead, attention increasingly shifted toward legacy and principle. Those closest to the review began recognizing that Prince Philip's thinking had been shaped by something far deeper than material concerns. He had spent a lifetime defending duty, honoring loyalty, and preserving traditions he believed mattered. If he had indeed left behind one final commitment, then perhaps that commitment reflected the very values that had defined him from the beginning. And once that possibility entered the conversation, everything changed. Because understanding why the forgotten beneficiary mattered was one thing. Accepting what that understanding meant for the rest of the royal family was something entirely different. The emotional weight of the discovery was becoming impossible to ignore, and with each passing day, the reactions within palace circles grew stronger. But once the significance of the discovery became clear, reactions throughout royal circles were impossible to contain. By the time whispers reached wider royal circles, speculation was spreading faster than anyone anticipated. Questions multiplied, memories resurfaced, and long-buried assumptions suddenly faced intense scrutiny from every direction. What had started as a private matter confined to trustees and legal advisors was no longer contained within those narrow circles. The emotional weight attached to the discovery had become too great, and according to various reports, conversations were now taking place among courtiers, senior aides, and members of the wider royal family. Yet despite the growing curiosity, answers remained frustratingly elusive. The mystery surrounding the forgotten beneficiary had evolved into something far larger than anyone expected. It was no longer simply about documents, it was about memory, about promises, and perhaps most importantly, about what Prince Philip had truly wished to preserve. Within palace circles, quiet discussions intensified. Courtiers who had spent years observing the rhythms of royal life reportedly found themselves revisiting old assumptions. Some questioned whether certain relationships had been misunderstood. Others wondered if pieces of the story had existed in plain sight all along, unnoticed because nobody had thought to connect them. Every new conversation seemed to revive another forgotten memory. Every recollection added yet another layer to an already complicated picture. Family members themselves were said to have reacted with varying degrees of surprise. Some reportedly viewed the development with curiosity, while others approached it with caution. There were those who believed the answer lay hidden in Prince Philip's lifelong devotion to duty and loyalty. Others remained convinced that only a careful interpretation of the records could reveal the truth. Yet despite differing perspectives, one thing united everyone involved. No one had anticipated that the late Duke's papers would continue to raise questions years after his passing. Throughout the uncertainty, King Charles reportedly focused on preserving stability. Sources close to royal circles suggest that the monarch remained determined to prevent emotions from overtaking reason. Family harmony had always been important to him, and with tensions quietly increasing, patience became more valuable than ever. Advisors surrounding the king repeatedly stressed the importance of discretion. Premature conclusions, they warned, could create misunderstandings that might prove impossible to reverse. Time, restraint, and careful judgment were essential. Meanwhile, media insiders began sensing unusual activity behind palace walls. Without access to the details themselves, many simply noticed subtle signs that something significant was unfolding. The atmosphere surrounding royal affairs seemed different. Conversations among commentators and observers gradually turned toward speculation. Questions surfaced, rumors circulated. Yet those closest to the matter remained largely silent, understanding that the truth was still emerging. As discussions expanded, historical relationships came under renewed examination. Bonds formed decades earlier were reconsidered. Moments once dismissed as unimportant suddenly appeared rich with meaning. The past itself seemed to be returning, bringing with it emotions and memories that many had long since placed behind them. And with every revelation, debate intensified over one question above all others. What had Prince Philip truly wanted remembered? Was the forgotten beneficiary merely part of an administrative oversight? Or had the late Duke intentionally left behind one final reminder of the principles he cherished most? The answer to that question remained uncertain. Yet amid all the speculation, something deeper was beginning to emerge. Something that reached beyond inheritance, beyond family expectations, and beyond the mystery itself. Because those who had known Prince Philip best understood that his life had always been guided by values that could not be measured in titles or possessions, and perhaps in the end, that truth mattered more than anything hidden within the papers themselves. But perhaps the greatest lesson of all was one Prince Philip himself had spent a lifetime teaching. In the end, the discovery was never simply about names on paper. It was about memory, loyalty, and the enduring influence of a man whose decisions continued to shape the royal family long after his passing. And for some, that realization proved far more powerful than anyone had imagined. As the intense speculation slowly gave way to reflection, those closest to the story began to recognize that the true significance of the forgotten beneficiary extended far beyond legal documents and estate records. What had emerged from Prince Philip's papers was not merely a question of inheritance. It was a reminder of the principles that had guided him throughout his life. Even years after his passing, the Duke of Edinburgh's influence remained unmistakable. His values, his sense of duty, and his commitment to honoring promises continued to leave their mark upon the institution he had spent decades supporting. For many involved in the review, the forgotten beneficiary gradually came to represent something much larger. According to those familiar with the discussions, the discovery evolved into a symbol of loyalty remembered and commitments preserved. Prince Philip had always been known for valuing service, devotion, and trust. Those qualities defined his character, and now, through an extraordinary sequence of events, they appeared to be speaking once more. What some initially viewed as an administrative mystery had transformed into a powerful reminder that promises made with sincerity could endure far longer than anyone expected. Trustees themselves reportedly reflected upon the responsibility they carried. Their work had not simply involved reviewing papers or interpreting records. They had become custodians of history. Every document they handled represented a piece of a much larger story, one that stretched across decades of royal life. The experience reinforced the importance of preserving memories and respecting the intentions of those who came before. In many ways, they had discovered that history possesses a remarkable ability to protect itself, waiting patiently until the right moment for forgotten truths to emerge. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla and several senior members of the royal family found themselves confronting a changed narrative. Long-held assumptions had been challenged, and expectations that once appeared fixed had evolved into something far more complex. Yet despite the emotional weight surrounding the discovery, King Charles reportedly remained focused on maintaining unity and stability. According to various reports, he understood better than anyone that the monarchy had endured because it adapted while preserving the values that mattered most. Patience, understanding, and respect would remain essential as the family continued processing the extraordinary developments that had unfolded. Palace insiders also acknowledged the emotional impact left behind by the discovery. Beyond the discussions, the legal reviews, and the speculation, there remained a profound sense of humanity. Because at its heart, this story had always been about relationships and memories. It had demonstrated that the past possesses a remarkable ability to return when least expected. Moments once forgotten can regain meaning. Promises thought to be lost can find new life. And legacies that appear complete may still have one final chapter waiting to be revealed. Perhaps that was Prince Philip's final lesson. Not one about wealth or privilege, but about loyalty, duty, and remembering those who mattered. Because history does not always disappear with time. Sometimes it simply waits quietly, hidden within old letters and forgotten records, until circumstances allow it to speak once more. And when it does, its message can prove more powerful than anyone ever imagined. Because even years after his passing, Prince Philip's final legacy still had the power to surprise and to remind the royal family that forgotten promises are not always forgotten forever. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.